The question to end all questions. Favorite of internet nerds since 2003. Would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? There are a lot of interesting ways to think about it. Let's look at the, science. First, to determine what would be more feasible to defeat in combat, we need to better define the parameters of the question. In particular, by size, do we mean primarily the same height or weight? For the purposes of this, we're going size in an eyeballing it sense, perceived size, ergo size in the height sense. If we decided we meant weight, for the record, the horses would definitely be the way to go. Ducks are so low in density that to weigh the same as even a fairly small horse, a duck would need to be about 33 stories tall. Here's the math I did on that. An average duck, we're using the mallard specifically, is about 26 inches long, 2.16 feet tall, stretched as much as it can, which is not its normal standing height, and 3.5 pounds. Let's say, standing the way a duck usually does, it's about 2/3 as tall as it is when stretched straight up, based on some asides on the duck, Wikipedia, and photos I found online. At this juncture, I'd also like to mention that it is surprisingly hard to find out how tall animals are from toes to top of the head. They're just not measured like that, nearest I can tell. So I'm doing my best here. That would put a regular duck at around 1.5 feet tall, standing normally. Which sounds, I don't know, about right. An average horse weighs, according to Google, 840 to 2,200 pounds. That means a duck that weighs 3.5 pounds and stands about 1.5 feet tall at the weight of the smallest horse would be 240 times the size of a normal duck, or 360 feet standing still. Stories in a normal residential house are about 9 to 11 feet. Using a generous 11 feet, the smallest possible duck weighing as much as a horse would be 32.72 stories tall. And then think of it stood up straight. That's way too much duck. Meanwhile, a 3.5 pound horse would be teeny tiny. Now, of course, in real life, the duck probably wouldn't be able to exist at a 1-to-1 ratio like that, but I'm not ornithologist enough to tell you how the body would change. So we're assuming that the animals somehow exist in direct proportion to their larger or smaller selves. So we'll measure by height instead, somewhat challenging as it might be, and use the dimensions we have for sure. But first, here are the basic standard arguments for each side. Those in the horse-sized duck camp argue that one foe to fell would be easier than 100. You can just focus on the one duck rather than worrying about the onslaught of tiny horses. Plus, ducks are much less intelligent than horses, and such a large duck would be unable to fly and would tire easily. The cons of the large duck? Strong chest muscles. Oh, and it'd be a huge duck. Plus, that trademark duck dumbness might mean it wouldn't know when to quit. In the 100 duck-sized horses camp, they seem individually easier to defeat. They're small, and their hooves and teeth wouldn't likely be large and powerful enough to make any real dent in the skin. In the words of known human Glenn Beck, you could take the duck-sized horses. What are they going to do? They can't trample you. Plus, horses are easily spooked and travel in herds, which some argue means that if you get a few on the run, you could get all of them to turn ponytail and run. If you want a more math-heavy weigh-in on this problem, Wired's Rhett Elaine did a breakdown I frankly did not understand that estimated the horse-sized duck would actually be incredibly heavy, over 6,600 pounds, using density. My estimation, on the other hand, would be that a duck would be less dense than a horse. But I've had a hard time getting the standard volume of either to prove my point with any sort of science. So we move on. Let's look at each side in a bit more detail, starting with the horse-sized duck. There's some risks associated with an 8-ish foot tall duck, for sure. Given its sheer size and weight, it has a better chance of killing you than those tiny horses, for sure. But there is some merit to the argument that one opponent to focus on ups your chances. Plus, ducks being easily distracted, you could simply feed it bread, then mount it, and as others have pointed out, either go for its tender neck if you're looking at this as a fight to the death, or attempt to tame it and make it your new feathered friend and vehicle. Hey, anything's better than your old 96 Ford Taurus. Add to that this little nugget of information from ornithologist Dr. Kevin McGowan of Cornell University, who told DigitalTrends.com, ducks are not really a real feisty sort of animal. If their home is threatened, they will bite. They will rush at a smaller predator. But he says that even a 1,000-pound duck probably couldn't do much damage. In his words, bring on your biggest duck. I'd stick my finger in its mouth. He goes on to explain the duckbills, being flat, spread out the impact of any nip or bite across a large surface area. And in terms of teeth, they don't have any. Now, if that thing could get you in its gizzard, you'd be in some trouble. But assuming you're adult human-sized and the duck is horse height, and not building-sized, its gizzard might not even be big enough to fit you. At least one can hope. Plus, there's no way that sucker could fly. And then there's the political considerations. As The Atlantic currently pointed out, in America, you can kill a duck. The duck lobby is made up of people who kill ducks. Killing a giant duck out of season would, at worst, result in a citation for hunting without a license. The horse lobby, on the other hand, is made up of horse people. And there's no horse hunting in America. Said John M. Eady of the Department of Wildlife, Fish and Conservation Biology at UC Davis, there is no sport horsery. The legal implications would have you tied up in court, bankrupt, or in prison faster than you can say secretariat. And then there are the 100 duck-sized horses. Here are a few things to consider. Let's say a Clydesdale horse measures almost 9 feet tall and weighs 1,700 pounds. That means per foot, that horse weighs 188 pounds. So a 1.5 foot tall horse would probably still carry some heft, even if it wouldn't be quite that heavy. And have you seen 100 horses lately? Here's a photo of a little less than 50 of them coming at you. Now double that number of horses. That's way too many horses. Although maybe I'm a little bit biased. Others would argue that the horses would be pretty light, and being small wouldn't be able to do much damage. This is a fair way to think of it. If they're right, the horses might be able to leave you bruised and beat up, but there aren't a lot of opportunities for death, which is an important consideration. But Wade Sundell, a world-class saddle bronc rider, said that while one would-be duck-sized horse would be pretty harmless, 100 of them could probably do some damage. With that many duck-sized horses coming at you, his words of wisdom? Try to get to safety as fast as you can. For whatever it's worth, he'd pick the big duck too. It's a doozy of a question, and since it's become so popular, we have great answers from a lot of famous people. For example, here's what the Mythbusters had to say in a Reddit AMA. Shorthand for Ask Me Anything. Adam, totally 100 duck-sized horses. Ducks are nasty, but delicious creatures. I'd hate to meet one that large. Jamie, I would fight the horse-sized duck, because it wouldn't really be much of a challenge to fight duck-sized horses, would it? I mean, you could just kick them, and it's not like they could climb up on you much. A horse-sized duck could be quite dangerous, but I bet you could put a stick in its beak and it would be unable to bite. And I would like to hear what a horse-sized duck quack would sound like. Insightful. President Barack Obama was asked the hypothetical during his AMA in August of 2012, and though he didn't answer it at the time, there have since been numerous pieces detailing what White House staffers later reflecting on the question thought he should pick and what Obama would surely have picked. The people say, horse-sized duck. As much because of the aforementioned legal implications as anything else. And here, check out Bill Murray waffling about what to choose.
So would I rather fight one or the other? I guess I'd take my chances with a horse-sized duck. I'd act like I were trying to ride it, and then I would strangle it from behind.
He's the best. We also have answers from Glenn Beck and Rand Paul, both of whom felt the 100 duck-sized horses was the obvious choice. And Neil Gorsuch was totally stumped by the question in his confirmation hearing when it was posed by Senator Jeff Flake on behalf of Flake's teenage son. The kooky question is all over pop culture and the news. But where did this fascinating inquiry come from? Well, truth be told, no one's entirely sure. Here's what we do know. It appeared in the letters to the editor section of a Metro newspaper in 2003, and a man named Dan Hill blogged about it, taking the question from print to the internet. While Reddit has certainly popularized the question, that's proof that the question predates Reddit, given that the site wasn't even launched until 2 years later. But where did it come from? Perhaps the mind of some twisted journalist? Since then, it's taken the internet by storm and continues to pop up on the regular, though 2013 was surely the height of its popularity. If it came down to it, I think I'd personally choose the one horse-sized duck. But I suppose there are arguments for both sides. One way or the other, you're doing a battle with wild animals. If you think you know which one better suits your fighting style, that's the one you should go with. To each his duck or horse-sized own. Maybe you're a horse whisperer. Maybe ducks can smell your fear. In the end, ultimately, I think I'm with Bill Murray. Whichever you send at me, I'd rather just try to befriend it. If you enjoyed this video, then why not subscribe? Hit that bell icon as well so you're more likely to get notified of our noble answers to your burning questions. Also, if you have any questions you want answered, make sure to tell me in the comments section down below. And to keep filling your brain with regal knowledge, check out these videos here. They're magnificent.